Do you believe in real love, loss, triumph, failure? This is a tale of two lovers whose wings will be forever intertwined. Discount Tom Cruise, Amelia Earhart. Arriving in theaters this summer, the most bestest pilot.
I've been waiting for you. Thanks for meeting me.
I've been waiting for you, actually. Thanks for meeting me.
Cool ride.
I know.
You know, the time we spent together over these last few weeks here in San Diego, they've been really great. If I knew any better, I would ask you to never leave.
Oh, we've been over this before, Pete. You can't achieve a promotion, you choose not to retire, and despite your attempts, you won't die. You refuse to wear a helmet while driving well over the speed limit on a Kawasaki H2. Your first movie from 1986, directed by Tony Scott, was great. Your newest movie from 2022 by Joseph Kosinski was even better. When will enough be enough? You can't always be the top gun, you know?
I'll be damned if I ever stop trying.
Well, you're gonna have to try without me then. I'm leaving. I have to fly around the world. Gotta be the maverick that everyone needs me to be.
You leave my life and come right back into it. How will I know if you're all right?
You won't.
Amelia, don't you dare break my heart. I love you.
I know.
Will Discount Tom Cruise marry Amelia? Will Amelia be the maverick that everyone needs her to be? The most bestest pilot. Only in theaters, summer of 2023.
Welcome to the History Out of the Box podcast. I am your lovely, beautiful host, Cam, and with me I have the most interesting woman alive.
Me? Jen?
Yeah.
Wow, I thought we were about to talk about the most... Well, she's not alive anymore. Maybe. The most interesting woman who ever lived.
None of the people we talk about are alive.
Well, I know, and to be frank, she would be 115 years old if she was still alive today, so we're just going to go ahead and say that while we don't have definitive proof that she is dead, we're just going too soon.
Well, I'm going to stop you before we jump too far into the episode. If you happen to like any of the content that you see today, you can find it on Instagram at History Out of the Box. You can also find it on YouTube if you happen to be watching on the beautiful authoritarian YouTube. And additionally, you can also hear our audio on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, normally every week on Tuesdays, video on Wednesdays. Of course, per our last episode, we had to give an explanation as to why things have gotten a little squirrely. Other than that,
we're back, baby.
We're back. We're making episodes. We're talking about people in our spare time. And we are, as far as I can tell, the only podcast that connects our listeners with the ghosts of their collective past. Whether you think that's silly or serious, it is both.
Yes, the only history podcast to ever have been available for you to listen. You're welcome. Only one. I mean, if you type in history on any podcasting network, we're the only one that shows up. It's amazing.
I'm David Attenborough. You know, I mean, I might as well just start doing the podcast in that voice. So, who are we talking about today? She is a she.
We think so.
We got to clarify that today. And who are we talking about?
Often referred to as the Queen of the Air, Amelia Earhart was a trailblazing aviator and a women's rights activist who shattered gender stereotypes and made history for her daring feats of aviation. I am super excited to talk about her.
So we're talking about Amelia Earhart.
Yes.
You know what I think about when I think of Amelia Earhart? What? I think of Amelia Bedelia and the Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants. Not plants, pants. Yeah, I merged two things there, but think about it.
Wait, why?
Amelia Bedelia and the Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants.
What's the Traveling Pants have to do with anything?
Nothing. You merge them together and it's a best-selling franchise.
I guess like a, I don't know, empowering book / movie?
About sisterhood.
Okay, well, she did have a sister.
You know, those movies don't exist anymore.
Empowering movies?
No, like sisterhood movies. There was like a whole swath of like sisterhood movies that were a thing, and now it's violence and depression.
I don't know. It's either Marvel or DC. Those are the only movies that come out anymore.
Well, anyway, back to Amelia Earhart.
Her life was full of excitement, adventure, and mystery. We will talk about that mystery because there have been some viral videos I've been seeing talking about her mysterious disappearance.
She lost the directions.
Okay, maybe. Actually, you might not be far off. But she set numerous aviation records. She made history as the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean. But her story does not end there. Her mysterious disappearance while attempting to fly around the world in 1937 only added to her legend.
Legend.
Yes. and the life and legacy of Amelia Earhart, a true icon of courage and perseverance.
Perseverance.
That's right. To be frank, I've actually always kind of been interested, well, not always, but since I was very young, interested in Amelia Earhart because my 6th grade teacher actually told us about it, and it was like a whole thing. Like for a couple months, we were all just kind of speculating what happened to her. That was many years ago. So the late Brian Scheffler, my 6th grade teacher, who tragically passed away when I was very young, it was a hard time. This one is for your memory.
Scheffler.
Amelia Earhart was born on July 24th, 1897.
Wow.
What? Oh, the picture?
What a child.
Oh, she's very sweet looking. You are mean.
You know what? I was sweet looking too.
She was born in Kansas to her parents, Samuel Edwin, he went by Edwin Earhart, and Amelia Amy, she went by Amy Otis Earhart. And she had one younger sister named Grace, who went by Muriel Earhart. Muriel. Everyone kind of went by their well, Amelia, her mom went by Amy, but everyone went by their middle name.
Names that don't exist anymore. They just don't exist.
Well, her sister Muriel was born in 1899, so she was just a couple years younger than her.
Went from Muriel to Shoelace.
Nice.
Yeah.
Amelia's nickname from a very young age was Mealy or Millie, and she carried that nickname well into her adulthood. Amelia was an adventurous and tomboyish child who enjoyed playing outdoors. She was interested in aviation from a young age. She would build and fly paper airplanes, but her parents seemed to be rather progressive in the sense where they let their children pursue their interests, but not forcing them to conform to any sort of traditional gender roles. You know, this is the late 1800s, early 1900s. You know, they were able to play outside and rough around a little bit. But she was a very determined and independent child who excelled in school and was particularly interested in science and math. And her sister and her would climb trees, keep moths and worms, and they weren't afraid of playing with boys.
You know what's crazy?
What?
Remember the show Little House on the Prairie?
Never watched it.
Well,
now where are you going to go with this?
My reference is irrelevant. I was going to say that that was a show about like 1800s and boys and girls were playing outside. Do you want to know why?
Why?
Because there was nothing else to do.
Well, 1800s is... We're talking... She was born in 1897.
Yeah, there was nothing to do. Had nothing to do with gender roles.
There was something to do.
There was nothing to do outside. Well, there's nothing to do inside, so they go outside.
Well, she did, like I said, not conform to traditional gender roles throughout most of her life. So it's just a theme, Cam, okay? Keep it the program, all right? For example, in 1904, Amelia and her sister worked with their uncle to put together a makeshift roller coaster on the roof of their family's tool shed, and she wanted to test it out, obviously. And although she got a bit scraped up when this happened, she loved the exhilarating nature of being on this like crazy contraption and sort of fell in love with the idea of like an adrenaline rush, I guess. And not long after, at age 10, her father took her to the Iowa State Fair, and that's where she saw her first airplane.
I thought you were going to say Ayahuasca State Fair, and I was like, wow,
that would have provided quite an adrenaline rush.
That would have.
She never was introduced to Adderall at any time in her life because it didn't exist.
It didn't exist.
Yeah.
But during her childhood,
maybe it did.
I have no idea.
History of Adderall. We don't know. This is not what that.
Yeah.
This is not that podcast.
This is not about that.
Yeah.
Don't take our word for that.
No.
But she moved frequently with her family due to her father's job as a lawyer, but also his pretty severe struggle with alcoholism. It caused some financial instability in her family, but Amelia's grandparents were supportive. They played a very significant role in her life and her upbringing. And at age 12, her father was briefly institutionalized for several months, and her mother, who had trained as a nurse, had to become the breadwinner and support the family. But after that very tumultuous time, Amelia's mother took the children to Chicago to live with friends while Edwin Earhart tried to figure out this job situation. And it did come together, but, you know, it was just a tough time for obviously a 12-year-old to go through. She attended Hyde Park High School in Illinois until she graduated, and she had a bit of a rough time. I actually saw this, and this was so sad. She was commemorated in her yearbook with the caption, AE, her initials, the girl in brown who walks alone. Like, brutal, dude. Teenagers are horrible. They just have been horrible throughout time. The difference back in the day was you'd send them off to war to die.
That hasn't
now they
changed.
do by choice still.
That hasn't changed.
I was going to say.
That possibility is still there.
That
It's
was
small.
very dark and sad, so I'm sorry, but...
Okay, first of all, look, this is why we have the problems that we have today. One, Amelia's parents let her go through trials. They let her ride a roller coaster off the shed. There was no helicopter.
I don't know if they encouraged that. Her uncle was sort of the one who was...
I can imagine that she
was a fun uncle.
Exactly. Yeah, she was fine. If the uncle did it, then... other thing is apologizing for... You know what? We joke about things that make us uncomfortable.
I guess so. Yeah.
On another note, Amelia Earhart, a young Amelia Earhart, looks like Millie Bobby Brown, and it's freaking me out.
Maybe a little bit. Similar.
Looks just like Millie Bobby Brown.
You know what? Millie Bobby Brown playing Amelia
Reincarnation.
Earhart.
No, that's not what I'm getting at.
But she'd play a really good Amelia Earhart. Now I'm thinking about it.
Reincarnation. That's what I'm getting at.
Good casting. There you go.
I would be great as a casting director. Anyway.
Now, of course, we have to talk about World War I. We are in the early 1900s after all. And I guess I was just talking about war. My segue. You ruined it. But after graduating high school, Amelia attended a Red Cross training course in Toronto, Canada while visiting, and she served as a nurse's aide during the war. She volunteered for this position after seeing an advertisement in the local newspaper, and she felt a very strong desire to contribute to the war effort, as so many young men and women did at the time. She assisted with the care of returning wounded soldiers, many of whom had been injured in the trenches. And for anyone who knows anything about World War I and the trenches specifically, disgusting, dire times for everyone.
Good old trench foot.
Yeah. Rough. I know there's
memories.
some amazing and amazingly sad movies out there that try to depict what the trenches were like.
1917.
Great movie.
Anyway.
Awful, but good. And she helped prepare food for the injured. She handed out prescribed medication, that sort of thing. And while it was both challenging and rewarding, it did give her some perspective to see the emotional and physical toll that the war would take on individuals and their families. And she developed a very deep sense of empathy and compassion from that time. And that was very early in her life.
A lot of men died for nothing.
Yes.
Yeah. Let's talk about this one.
Yeah, but we're going right into an even happier subject, the Spanish flu.
Oh.
Because again, don't forget, about 100 years ago, not exactly the same.
Exactly 100 years ago,
there was a
happened.
pandemic that spread throughout the world, and this was the Spanish flu. In 1918, while working as a nurse in Toronto, Amelia was tending to patients when she herself became one after experiencing pneumonia and maxillary sinusitis. I can't pronounce that quite right. I'm not a doctor. Okay, thank you. Yes, I'm going to have you say it again if I have to say it again. Sinusitis. There we go. Without antibiotics being around at the time for her to get over this pretty quickly, her recovery was difficult, and she did have a lot of pressure around one eye, extreme headaches, that sort of thing. Obviously, you think, your sinus being like clogged. She was discharged from the hospital only after a few weeks, but her recovery really took about a year. Chronic sinusitis. Chronic sinusitis was something that plagued her throughout the rest of her life, really, and it would affect her flying down the road. She would sometimes wear a bandage over her cheek with like a drainage tube, even when she was flying, because, the altitude and the pressure, and it was just a chronic thing that she had going on. And
that sounds terrible.
Yeah.
Rip sinusitis.
Yes. But after the war ended, Amelia attended Columbia University in New York City
for $2.
1919, most likely about $2. She began studying subjects such as, English literature, chemistry, medicine, and she was one of the few women at the university at the time. But she didn't want to stick around for very long. Amelia Earhart was a college dropout. Bum, 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 bum.
She saved herself hundreds of thousands of dollars in crushing debt.
She did.
Yeah.
She did. She was excellent at school by all accounts. She was actually pretty good, except that she struggled with the social aspects of college. She felt left out among some of the wealthier and more privileged classmates who went to school. The Kennedys. She didn't go to school with the Kennedys, but they're
probably there.
Yeah, maybe. Now, after dropping out, Amelia worked a series of odd jobs to support herself. She moved to California to be with her parents and relocated to begin exploring her career options as a Columbia College dropout. It's okay, Amelia. We all get it.
Why does everyone move to California to try and figure out their life circumstances?
Listen, as people who were born and raised in California, we have to tell you, you don't have to move to California.
You don't have to
figure
do
it out.
No, there are a lot of
people
places.
Still don't figure it out when they go there.
They don't figure it out more. It becomes more complicated. There are a lot of places in the United States. The United States is a big place that have plenty of opportunity.
You know what, though? At the time, like we're talking in the early 1900s, and like it was a different place in California. There was a lot more. There's still opportunity now, but it's not as easy today, I think, to necessarily move there and flourish. I mean, it's still possible. Look, if that's your dream, I don't want to kill it, so that's great. But it's definitely not exactly the same.
It is also possible to find a needle in a haystack. But
well, in 1920, at the age of 23 years old, Amelia attended an air show in Long Beach, California. You're familiar with that, so am I. Mm-hmm. This airfield there.
Still exists.
Yes. She took her first airplane ride with pilot Frank Hawks, who was later famous.
Frank Hawks.
Yes. What do you think I said?
Frank Hawks.
He was later famous for being an air racer, and she paid $10 for a 10-minute flight. And it was never the same for her. She loved it. She loved it. She said that, like, you know, within the first couple minutes of being in the air, she just knew she had to fly a plane. She loved it that much. And the experience ignited her passion for aviation, actually pushing her in the direction of beginning flying lessons with a female instructor named Nita Snook, who reminds me of Snooki from Jersey Shore.
Wow.
Maybe it's because
a situation comes in.
Like, hey, yo, Amelia. By the way, I love Jersey Shore. I love that. I love every single one. Even today, I just love them all so much.
Here's the thing: is you watch a lot of trash TV, and I don't.
But I love them.
Jersey Shore is up there. I can watch it. It's okay. But like Love Island, I can't do it. Love Island.
Jersey Shore is better than Love Island.
Yeah,
that's my hot take.
It is. That's not a hot take. It is better than Love Island. Love Island is.
I love Love Island too. So I mean, you're not going to hear me saying
boom,
otherwise.
Boom, 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 boom. Like I come out like after like work sometimes late at night. I come out and I hear that on the TV. Boom, 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 boom. 12 singos.
I'm buzzing, man. I can't do an accent.
She looks at me and she says like, "Hey, what are you doing, isn't it?" Like do some weird, strange thing, like
Love Island,
get me some chippies, you know. Like that's my interpretation of.
I won't even try. I won't offend anyone with my terrible British accent. But
also on that note,
what
that show's cursed. Not going to dive into it, but that show's cursed. Love Island.
Yeah.
Yep. Anyway,
Nita Snook.
Yes,
Snook was one of the few women pilots in the country at the time, and she charged $500 initially for 12 hours of instruction, but Amelia worked really hard to save up, eventually saving $1,000, and Snook trained Amelia on a Curtiss JN-4 Jenny biplane. A popular training aircraft of the era. Sorry.
Narcissism plug, fam.
I gotta do it.
Yeah, dude.
Now, despite facing discrimination and skepticism from some male pilots, not all, but some instructors at the time gave her a hard time because she was a woman.
What, you can't fly a plane because you're a girl?
Exactly.
Like, so stupid. It's so dumb. And here's the thing. It's dumb now, too, in a different way. It's equally dumb. It was dumb then, and it's still dumb today.
Actually, it's still amazing. If you look at the stats, it is still a very, very male-dominated industry.
Do you want me to answer this logically?
I'm not looking. It wasn't a question.
You said a rhetorical statement. I'll say a rhetorical statement. Maybe it's because some groups of people are not interested in flight.
I don't know. There's this awesome pilot.
How many
I follow
NASCAR
on Instagram,
drivers do you know?
I don't know anyone who's a NASCAR driver personally. Talk to the hand over there.
Yeah, exactly. Stupid today, stupid back then. All of it's dumb.
Amelia persisted despite the naysayers. Okay,
all of our haters, bro.
She even cropped her hair, which I think looked freaking great on her. She cropped her hair real short to match a lot of the other female pilots of the time, and she purchased a secondhand bright chromium yellow Keener Airster biplane.
Yeah, dude.
I don't know because
she was a gangster.
Yeah. I can't hear whatever you just pressed, but sure.
DJ air horn vine
Very
boom.
nice. She called it the Canary, which I thought was pretty cool.
Oh, that's cute.
In October of 1922, Amelia flew that plane 14,000 feet or 4,300 meters up into the sky and set the world record for female pilot flight height, which I just thought that's just a fun little thing to say. Flight height. What? Okay.
I'm just learning and listening.
Good. On May 16th, 1923, Amelia became the 16th woman to earn a pilot's license in the United States by the FAI. And in that same year, she decided to further her aviation education by attending the Kinnerfield School of Aviation in California, where she studied some flying techniques of advanced qualities.
More advanced qualities.
Sure, yeah. Just
advanced flying mechanics.
Thank you. There we go. Perfect. And she became involved in the local aviation community. She participated in air shows, competitions, that sort of thing.
Sometimes I think you might have dyslexia. You might have it. You might have it. That's like not like criticism. You might have.
I know.
I've
said that many times.
The first dyslexic podcast host.
Sorry. She spent some time as a photographer as well, and a publicist for a company that provided sightseeing tours by plane. But there were financial constraints because guess what? Turns out being a pilot is expensive. It still is today. We do have a pilot friend, and I know he has, it's not just expensive.
We have multiple pilot friends.
Yes, I know. And it's not just expensive.
It is debilitating.
It is time consuming to a point of
it's emotional
insanity.
Emotionally strenuous.
But we love our pilots. It is a hard job. So then and now, it's a lot of work, and it's
makes
a
me
lot
wonder
of
if back
money.
then they had the same type of pilot cadence in the planes.
Roger.
Looks like we've landed in Detroit, Michigan. We're going to be on the tarmac for about 15 minutes. It's beautiful 64 degrees outside with a wind chill of 32 degrees, negative 32 degrees. There's no sun and the sky has gone blood red, but all you guys visiting should have a wonderful time here in beautiful Detroit.
It's so peaceful.
It's like the same. Like
I love when you're like stuck on a tarmac, because I was just a couple days ago, I was stuck on a tarmac, and
you love being stuck on a tarmac.
No, because you're stop. Don't distract me from my thought. We're sitting there, and the flight was actually shorter than the amount of time it took for them to open the door, because no one was there to open the door, and he kept coming on the intercom to say, like, I don't know what's going on, but he was so peaceful. It was like calming me down.
We've made it about an hour early. We didn't plan in accordance in relation to our flight path. We should have had people here.
Okay, enough sidetracking.
Yeah, it's literally that is.
Okay.
It makes me want to fall asleep.
Pilots.
Expensive life.
Okay.
Emotional turmoil.
Inheritance from her grandmother was actually basically almost gone at this point because of a failed investment in a gypsum mine, which wasn't by her own.
Gypsum.
I don't know what that is. It's a mine, so I'm guessing it's a mineral. I should ask my father, who's a geologist.
What could it possibly be besides a mineral?
A rock? They aren't always the same, are they?
No.
You're going to make me sound stupid. Let's move on. You keep sidetracking me. You're going to make me sound dumb.
Wow, those good old gypsum rocks.
Anyway, inheritance almost gone. Amelia was forced to sell the Canary, and another plane she bought as well. But then she instead bought a yellow Kissel Goldbug Speedster 2-seat automobile, and she called it the Yellow Peril. I'm assuming that Amelia liked the color yellow.
One of the few, the proud, the freaks that like the color yellow. Yellow is the worst color.
I like it. I like yellow too.
Terrible.
Her parents were actually divorcing in 1924. Flying dreams faltered just a tad. She moved all the way to Massachusetts by driving the Yellow Peril all the way over there, found employment as a teacher and then a social worker. And she did maintain her interest in aviation and became VP of the American Aeronautical Society's Boston chapter. So
busy little yellow bee.
Yeah, that's right. But let's talk about the transatlantic flight. This is the first one. This isn't the one where she flew solo that I mentioned in the beginning. Charles Lindbergh. You recognize the name?
I know who Charles Lindbergh is.
Okay. Famously crossed the Atlantic Ocean solo in 1927. He was the first person to do it.
John F.
By
Kennedy.
plane.
John F. Kennedy. One of the presidents of the
You know the
United
name.
States. You know the name.
Amy Guest, who was another famous aviator at the time, expressed interest in following suit as being the first woman to do so, but she actually backed out because there was some safety issues and she was kind of worried about it.
They guessed she wouldn't have a very good time.
Ha ha ha. Funny.
I'm here all day.
She instead agreed to sponsor a woman to do it, and in April of 1928, Amelia got the phone call. And June 17th of that year, a groundbreaking achievement.
Imagine them going through a very, very long list of female pilots.
Well, the 16 people.
One page.
Yeah.
One of these guys is going to take the opportunity.
Yeah, right. But she made herself an international celebrity by doing just that, becoming a symbol of women's empowerment. While it was not the solo flight yet, it was a very historical journey because Amelia flew as a passenger aboard a Fokker airplane.
Yes. Let's be adults here, okay?
This airplane was called the Friendship, and she flew...
Fokker F7B3M.
Yes, whatever that means.
It's the model of the airplane.
Sorry, again.
I'm an
not
aviation expert.
Okay, sure. She flew in the Friendship as a passenger with two male pilots, Wilmer Stoltz and Lewis Gordon, both of whom were very experienced aviators, and the flight departed from Trespassy, Newfoundland, and traveled nearly 2,000 miles across the Atlantic Ocean, landing safely in Bury Port, Wales, 20 hours and 40 minutes later.
God.
She was a passenger, but she was also responsible for the flight log.
We have gotten so much faster.
20 hours. Ugh. How long is a flight from LA to London? Like,
where did they poop?
Maybe they held it.
For 20 hours? About 8 hours.
You can't go
New York
20
to
hours
London's
without
about
going
8
to the
hours.
bathroom. That's really not good for you, but
20 hours? Not going to. Normally, you should have one a day, dude.
I'm just saying, what maybe they were diapers, huh? I don't know.
Maybe they did.
Amelia's
we're
presence.
gonna land in.
Stop.
We're
No,
about
no
to
more.
land in Wales.
No
I
more.
gotta use the bathroom.
Okay. Amelia's presence on the flight was significant because it was the first time a woman had ever flown across the Atlantic Ocean. The achievement was especially remarkable given the prevailing attitudes toward women at the time, as many believed that women were not physically or mentally capable of such a feat.
Our country is ridiculous.
After the successful flight, Amelia received a hero's welcome in the U.S. and Europe and became a spokesperson for commercial aviation and women's rights. Notably, though, she downplayed the achievement. She actually called herself, quote, baggage, a sack of potatoes on the flight. And she stated that she would instead like to try it alone because she felt like she didn't really do anything. She was just there.
She rode passenger.
But she did keep the flight log, so it wasn't like she was sleeping the whole time. But yeah, it was fame time, baby. Amelia had made a name for herself very quickly. She was actually coined Lady Lindy. That was the press's nickname for her after Charles Lindbergh's Lucky Lindy. She did a lecture tour from 1928 through 1929, and she became involved in women's fashion. She previously had sewn a lot of her own clothes, but clothes in her image began to be sold very famously at Macy's department store, the same of today. Been around a very long time. And these were simple but classic items that were purposeful yet still feminine in nature. You have any comment on that? None? Good for you.
I think Amelia would have had a lot of thoughts about today.
On February 7th, 1931, Amelia Earhart married her husband, George Putnam. Putnam was a publisher and a publicist who had helped Amelia with her book, 20 Hours, 40 Minutes, which detailed the transatlantic flight in 1928 that she had been a passenger on. And he had also proposed to her 6 times before she agreed to marry him.
God, boy,
Reportedly.
is thirsty.
Well, wait till you hear this.
She said no.
Well, 6 times. Did she say yes 6 times?
Maybe.
The couple had a very strong relationship built on mutual respect, admiration, and support. Putnam encouraged Amelia's aviation career and helped to finance many of her flights and record attempts. He was also instrumental in promoting her image as a very trailblazing and independent woman, which helped further her celebrity status, giving her more opportunities to fly more, etc., etc. But you'll love this. Despite their deep love and admiration for each other, Earhart and Putnam had a very non-traditional marriage at the time. She describes it as a partnership of dual control. They maintained separate residences for much of their marriage and pursued their own careers, often in different parts of the country. They had a very open and unconventional relationship, which has been speculated to include affairs on both sides. We don't know for sure, but it wasn't exactly a traditional situation.
So you were wrong. I don't love that.
I know you're such a
I'm not
romantic.
No, I just think that's. Hey, darling, you want to get married? We'll never live in the same house. We'll never share the same bed, and we'll live in 2 separate residences. You'll never know what I'm doing. You'll never know what the women I see, and I'll never know the men you see. But we'll be married, darling.
I don't know.
I don't know, maybe.
That's just their thing, I guess.
Man,
While the two never had any children of their own, George did have 2 sons from a previous marriage, and Amelia seemed to get along very well with them. So that is the beginning, but I think we should go to a commercial break.
It's a beautiful and loving photo of 2 complete strangers sitting next to each other who claim to be married. Yeah, we're going to go to commercial break. I'm going to think about, I guess, the tax benefits that they were taking advantage of is probably what it was. But yeah, I've been thinking their marriage was like someone who has been drafted by a baseball team, like a professional Major League Baseball team, and is employed by that organization, but they play badminton in another country. Makes no sense.
They did the thing. They got married in his parents' backyard, and that was that, I guess.
Interesting.
But let's get back to flying. Enough of the personal marriage stuff. In 1932, Amelia became the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean, setting a new aviation record. The trip took place from May 20th through the 21st, and it began in Harbour Grace, Newfoundland, Canada, ended in Londonderry, Northern Ireland, covering approximately 2,026 miles. And she flew a single-engine Lockheed Vega 5B, which was specifically modified for her journey. The aircraft was equipped with additional fuel tanks to extend its range, and it was also fitted with a wireless system that allowed Amelia to communicate with the ground and other aircraft during the flight. The trip was not without its challenges, however. Amelia actually encountered poor weather conditions, including a dense fog, icy air, I don't know, and very strong winds. What? I didn't want to say conditions again. Air? I was looking for another word besides conditions. But the navigation was difficult, and at one point she was forced to fly below the clouds to avoid ice getting on the wings, which put her at risk of crashing into the ocean. In my opinion, that is foreshadowing, maybe. But
I don't think she crashed.
Well, we'll talk about that in detail. Despite the challenges, though, Amelia successfully completed the journey. She landed in a pasture field in Londonderry after 14 hours and 56 minutes in the air, and her accomplishment was widely celebrated. She became an even bigger international celebrity after that. Any comments? None.
I mean, this is a very traditionalist story here. I've heard it before too, so it's kind of like.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm trying to make it more interesting.
No, it's fine. No, it's fine. I do think that. I think the interesting aspects of this is the most interesting thing so far is not the fact that she's a pilot. It's the fact that her and her husband were married and lived in 2 separate houses across the country.
This record-setting flight across the Atlantic helped to shatter more gender stereotypes. Paved the way for future generations of human pilots. of female pilots.
Pave the way of future generations of human pilots.
She also wanted to become the first person to fly solo across the Pacific Ocean from Hawaii to California in 1935.
Already done by Captain Cook.
He didn't fly.
Might as well have.
The trip was approximately 2,400 miles. It took place January 11th to January 12th. She flew again in a Lockheed Vega 5C aircraft, which was specifically modified for the journey. It was equipped with all the same frills as the other plane.
Xbox, PS5.
Exactly, just in case she got bored. And while others had tried this route and had been forced to turn back around, she conquered it, and she successfully landed in Oakland, California after 18 hours and 15 minutes in the air. Her accomplishment was widely celebrated, a huge symbol of courage, determination, perseverance.
Back when Oakland was a beautiful city.
Oh, don't hate on Oakland, no. Don't do that.
It's a more beautiful city now.
I know they took the Raiders to Las Vegas. We don't want to hurt them anymore. That was mean.
They didn't lose much.
You're such a hater.
I mean, come on, like
You're such a hater. But Amelia had even bigger plans than Hawaii, California, Londonderry, Northern Ireland. No. She aimed to become the first woman to complete a flight around the world. This round-the-world flight would be sponsored by Purdue University and the U.S. government, and was intended to promote aviation and inspire women to pursue careers in aviation. Well, there's some really dark jokes I could make right now, and I'm not going to because we're talking about this.
Some would say the marketing in the future, the returns weren't that great.
Unfortunately, the marketing didn't work out. I mean, you probably, if you're listening to this, you probably know about Amelia Earhart and how this ends. And unfortunately, it doesn't inspire. That part is not that great. Luckily, there are plenty of women today who have done this. Amelia, unfortunately,
paved the way.
Almost. No, she played a big part in it. I'm joking.
You know, here's the thing: is like honestly, like people like you gotta laugh at this stuff because it's like sad.
It is sad.
It's like terribly sad.
So the only thing you can do is kind
laugh.
of like laugh.
Yeah.
Amelia's attempt to circumnavigate the globe by plane on March 17th, 1937 in Oakland, California was her first. She was accompanied by her navigator, Fred Noonan, and they together flew a twin-engine Lockheed Electra 10E aircraft. But additionally on this attempt was another person, Harry Manning, as an experienced navigator, and they were attempting to fly east to west. Okay, remember that. This is first attempt. They're flying from Oakland to Honolulu, Hawaii to begin with. The plane needed servicing.
Why would they do it east to west?
The weather conditions at the time, and well, there was specific reasons for starting that way, and I'll explain because the second time they didn't go that way. But the plane needed servicing on Luke Field in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, Honolulu.
A few years before faded time.
Yeah, and the next leg of their journey would be from Hawaii to Howland Island, a very small island in the Pacific. Manning, the navigator, was preparing arrangements to find the island, but upon the takeoff run from Hawaii, the plane instead skidded on its belly on the runway, and the propellers hit the ground. It was, an accident, but the cause has never been definitively stated. Amelia said it was a tire blew. Some witnesses said that too, but then other people said that it was pilot error, including, people reputable. So we're not really sure.
Both could have been true.
Maybe.
One could have been true. Pilots who are very good at what they do, no matter what is in between their legs, sometimes make mistakes. Mm-hmm. Believe it or not.
Well, either way, the plane was too damaged to continue. They had to have it shipped back for repairs to the Lockheed, repair shop. I don't know. But Manning decided, the navigator, Manning, he decided to abandon this whole thing. He had taken a leave of absence from work for the trek, and he was very put off about the errors and the amount of delays it was taking to get this done. So then and there, he ended his association with the entire trip.
Interesting.
The navigator.
Interesting.
Leaving Amelia and Fred Noonan alone in the attempt, neither of whom were skilled radio operators. And that, again, is very grim foreshadowing for the future. Second attempt, though.
Manning was never saw again.
No, I'm sure he had some thoughts, though, after all this.
I'm sure he did, yeah.
Soon thereafter, Amelia and Fred obtained the funds for another attempt. They had a lot of cheerleaders out there for them. They decided to fly in the opposite direction this time, west to east, due to changes in global wind and weather patterns along the route. So that's why they had chosen
east to west.
East to west beforehand, and then west to east the second time.
East to west.
East to west, as Patrick Starr would say. They flew from Oakland, California to Miami, Florida, and then numerous spots in South America, Africa, Southeast Asia, eventually landing in Lae, New Guinea on June 29th, 1937. After 22,000 miles of journey, and they only had 7,000 left before the circumnavigating the globe was complete.
Only 7,000.
But it was all over pretty much the Pacific Ocean. So they'd crossed oceans, but they had the Pacific Ocean's big.
Yeah.
In case you didn't know, it's pretty big. But
Big ocean.
they were excited. Okay, we were almost done with this long trip.
Yes, they were.
On July,
In more ways than one.
so dark. On July 2nd, 1937, Amelia.
Day before. Very special day, anyway.
Oh, yeah.
2 days before the most patriotic day in history. Anyway.
Amelia and her navigator, Fred Noonan, were flying from Lae, Papua New Guinea to Howland Island. Again, remember we mentioned it before. That's where they were supposed to go from Hawaii on the first attempt. This expected flight time was about 20 hours, and they would be crossing the date line, so they would actually be landing in the morning of the following day, but it would still be July 2nd. Because the international date line's like right there. And the journey was over 2,000 miles. It was the longest leg of the trip thus far. So they had stopped a bunch of times, but none were as long as this leg. And departing Lae, L-A-E, Papua New Guinea. Sorry, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. But the plane had 1,100 gallons of gasoline, which should have been plenty to get there. Their plane was never seen again. Here was the situation, okay? Listen up. If you don't know the deets, I'm about to share not everything, but most of it.
So the situation was a very interesting character on Jersey Shore. He was probably about 185 pounds.
Mike.
Early 30s. Jacked. Absolutely jacked. Now a celebrity, was crazy in his early 30s. Now he's much calmer, much more. He was likable then, but he's more likable now.
Tarantino?
I don't know. I call him The Situation. Is his title.
Sitch. Mike.
Situation.
The Situation.
Yeah.
We like.
So that's the situation. Just a quick rundown. Jersey Shore ran from.
That's the situation.
Jersey Shore ran from what, 2008 to.
They still do shows. It's just they're all adult now with like kids, and they're like mostly
original
respectful
season was
now.
like 2006 to like 2012 or something.
Okay, now let's talk about the Amelia Earhart, Fred Noonan plane
that
disappearance
situation. Oh,
yeah.
sorry.
Okay,
Yeah.
It's all right. I knew you were excited to talk about Mike.
Yeah, he's his best.
The weather was overcast and rainy, and the communication on the U.S. Coast Guard ship stationed on Howland Island was difficult because the island was not equipped with advanced radio equipment at the time, so there was just the ship nearby. And Amelia also may have been flying a bit lower due to the clouds, making the distance longer than if she were flying higher. You know what I mean? It's the lower you fly, the longer it takes. It's like, why would you get on an airplane if you could just drive? Well, it's faster to get there in an airplane. Okay. The last known position of the plane was about 800 miles into the journey near the Nukumanu Islands.
It sounds like you're talking about a Dr. Seuss book. I have no idea where these islands are.
Okay. South Pacific. West of Papua New Guinea.
Nukumanu.
Sure. Over the ocean. Radio transmissions were having problems that morning, and Howland Island was receiving strong and clear radio from Amelia, but she apparently could not hear them. Okay? At 7:30 a.m. local time, Howland Island time, Earhart transmitted the radio message that they only had about a half hour left of gas to fly, and they were trying to make constant communication with them. At 7:42 a.m., she stated that we must be right on top of you, but as is running low and we are unable to reach you by radio, we are flying at 1,000 feet. Okay? 1,000 feet. What? Before I continue, you have a thought?
If they're right on top of them at 1,000 feet, they'd be able to see the island.
That's why they're confused. At 7:48 a.m., she stated again that she could not hear them over the radio and asked to send voice signals so she could get a radio. Is that what I said?
7:58. You said 7:48.
7:58, excuse me.
Got to get the time right. This is very important.
Howland Island says the Coast Guard there said this transmission was extremely strong. They could hear her clearly, meaning the plane must have been in the immediate area. And they began searching or sending Morse code frequencies to try and make connection with the plane, which she did acknowledge, but she couldn't determine their direction still. She couldn't figure out where she was. And at 8:43 a.m., Amelia's final transmission was broadcast. She stated, "We are on the line 157-337. We will repeat this message. We will repeat this on 6210 kilocycles. Wait." And then what's been determined to be said, "We are running online north and south." It was a little garbled, that one. It's speculated that the cloud cover around the island may have been misunderstood as a very flat surface of an island. She may have thought she was seeing an island, but it could have been more clouds on the ocean. That's like, it's speculative. It was so cloudy, it was hard to see what was going on. But despite many attempts to establish radio contact and search for the plane, Earhart and Noonan were never found, and neither was their plane. The official search lasted until July 19th, so a couple weeks, and it was mostly, or was at the time, the most costly search in U.S. history. And again, the Coast Guard says that they must have been so close because it was so clear when she was trying to transmit to them, but they never found it. They never found any sign of a crash, but there are theories as to what happened.
The question that I have about a lot of this is predicated on how...
Go ahead.
Because normally when I think about this from a perspective of aviation or in any area from a specific, when it comes to any industry of skilled profession, when something like this happens, something went terribly wrong. Either way. And the question I have is there happens to be this dismissal of a lot of things. Credibility, skill level, years in a plane, how good were you, yada, yada, yada. And when I think of something like that, I would think that if I was attempting to do something like that and I was not a very good navigation person, I would source a navigation person.
Well, Fred Noonan was with her.
Yeah, but neither he nor her were as good as the last guy. So I guess my thinking is, would it be implausible to question whether or not the current societal circumstances surrounding her fame may have clouded the team's judgment
Maybe
on the planning? Perhaps.
I mean, the bottom line is they had Manning there first for a reason, and he backed out. And his thing that he took with him when he left that neither of them had was a very, very skilled radio person, which seemed to be the issue that they were having, was they could not get in touch with, or they couldn't hear the Coast Guard. So
I guess back to my point is, in the event of, and this is just me, right? So I'm not a professional here. I have no experience. My grandpa was a pilot, and I flew his plane with him like one time, which was really cool. He took me up in the Cessna. We were at like 25,000 feet, and he let me use the joystick up and down. It was cool.
He's gonna get in trouble.
No,
I'm just kidding.
No. Anyway, I mean, so I guess the thinking I have is, like, if you were in a professional scenario such as that, and the aviation industry is, for the most part, despite what Top Gun will have you believe, they're relatively professional in a lot of ways. Doesn't mean they don't have their crazy instances. They do, like any industry. But with that being said, you think of something like that and you're like, what possessed them to ignore the relevance of getting someone to replace Manning? Because
they believe that they could do it on their own.
Why have
and they did most of it on their own.
Why have them in the first place then?
Well, I don't know.
You get my point? Like, it probably wasn't, it might have been their decision initially, but it's like, you guys had funding. You could have waited. There wasn't really a threshold on this. There was like 5 other female pilots at that time. Like, how many of them are going to be in competition with you, Amelia, to fly around the world? You get what I'm saying? No, I don't know. And I don't know the intricacies of the planning. I don't know the intricacies of the team. I don't know if she was funding it. I don't know what the planning was associated with all of it. It could have been unilateral decision making by somebody else. With that being said, that's the immediate thing I think of. Because normally in a scenario like that, or in any scenario that is life-threatening, you need to have your T's crossed and your I's dotted. And if you have an area where you are not an expert, you bring someone in who is. Well,
to be fair, Noonan was, very good at what he did. He wasn't he didn't know what he was doing. We don't know exactly what happened. We can't really state for sure.
Well, I know for a fact they're unalived. So
they're very likely not
unalived. They're unalived.
Unless
either
they're
way.
115 years old and walking around.
Yeah.
But despite the extensive search efforts by the U.S. Navy and other organizations, there was no trace of them. And over the years, many theories have emerged about what have happened to them. And there's pretty much, there's more than this, but I'm just going to talk about the 4 main ones that you'll probably hear about. Theory 1, and probably the most obvious, is crashing into the ocean. And to support the running out of fuel and crashing the ocean theory, which I'd argue is the Occam's razor theory, you know what I mean? Just like, oh, a plane went missing over the ocean. Where do you think it went?
Well, yeah, that's the most likely plausible
situation.
scenario.
Various pieces of evidence, including the radio transmissions, eyewitness accounts, and debris found in the ocean that may or may not be a plane, we don't know, do support this theory. And it is probably the most widely accepted.
Okay.
They ran out of fuel. They were further than they thought they were and went past the island, or it was so cloudy they missed it. They went the wrong way. At one point they did say they were going north-south, which meant they would have been going either south of the island or they were way off course and way north of it. So ran out of fuel, landed in the ocean, either died on impact or died soon after,
Again, this kind of goes back to my point here is that I know I'm like 20/20 hindsight, but if you don't have radio communication, it doesn't
it's
seem
not like
like
they could just.
It doesn't seem like she
in the middle
had
of the ocean. It wasn't like they
adequate.
could just land in a field.
I know, but it doesn't seem like she had adequate radio equipment on the plane.
Well, she did at one point. I think it was when, I don't want to say this for sure. So I would, if you're listening to this and you're interested, I'd look this up to make sure of this. At one point, she did have problems crossing, I believe it was from South America to Africa, and it was over the ocean. She had some technological issues. I don't remember if it was the radio or the compass or something like that. So it wasn't like, this wasn't the first thing that went wrong in the entire trip.
Of course not.
But obviously, when you aren't able to hear the person to guide you where you're going, and it's too cloudy to see where you're going, and you don't have what we have today, like this perfect system that can drive the whole plane for you.
Well, I still think that the most important thing is not necessarily the visuals. The most important thing is the radio communication, because just like with today, they don't rely on visuals all the time. In fact, most of the time they don't rely on visuals.
I think they call it it's like blind something, right?
Well, they fly blind. Yeah. And not in the sense that they don't you don't see a pilot's not gonna be looking out the front window like that. They do that they do that, but it's not their main point of navigation.
I
so the same thing. I have to imagine this was prior to any semblance of civilian radar. Right?
I don't know. It's
must have been right
definitely
beforehand.
Archaic compared to today.
Of course.
Sure.
So I have to imagine it was right beforehand, because World War II, we started to have some semblance of that.
Yeah, think about that. This is prior to World War II.
Prior to World War II. So, and very, very briefly prior to World War II. So my thinking is like, okay, so if what you're relying on is your visuals and then radio, the thing you don't want to fail is your radio.
But the thing was, the radio was working. At least she was able to
one
transmit
way. That means it's not working.
Exactly. So it was just a strange circumstance. Anyway.
Yeah, it's just something to think about.
That is the most logical explanation, is they tragically lost their lives by crashing into the ocean somewhere. Okay. Theory number 2. The theory is that she was captured, her and Fred Noonan were captured by the Japanese. And this stemmed from the assumption that the Japanese may have believed the 2 aviators were actually U.S. spies and that their plane was mistaken for military aircraft. And according to the theory, the Japanese may have held Earhart and Noonan as prisoners, suspecting them of espionage, sabotage, and while some sources claim that Earhart may have even been taken to Japan for interrogation and torture, there are numerous investigations and searches over the years. There's no definitive evidence that this has ever been the case or to support this theory, really. And while some eyewitness accounts and documents suggest that the Japanese may have played a role in her disappearance, others argue this is extremely unreliable and misinterpreted. It's just unlikely. But that was one that was, a popular thought at the time. I mean, you have to remember, like I said, this is prior to World War II. And, yeah, there's a lot of culture issues at the time and world issue stuff at the time that may have provoked that kind of theory.
Well, you'd also think that if that was the case, then through World War II and over time, it would eventually come out, seeing that Japan is one of our strongest allies now, supposedly. So
theory number 3, and this one's actually gained some traction lately because of these viral videos I was mentioning in the beginning. You've seen them where they talk about Amelia getting eaten by coconut crabs. I've seen them. I was like, what? Anyway, there is a theory that they landed on an uninhabited island. And the theory is that the two subsequently died of starvation or exposure or, not having medical treatment. And it's gaining a lot of popularity. It was based on the idea that they may have missed their intended landing spot in Howland Island. And if you are a Google Earth person like me, I know I've talked about my love of Google Earth. It's my favorite thing. If you look up Howland Island, you will see it's a very small piece of land in the middle of the ocean. Not a lot around it. A little south of it is Baker Island. And a little south of that is this island that was at the time called Gardner Island. And it's highlighted in this whole theory. It's the island this whole theory kind of revolves around. It's now known as Nikomaro. Did I do that any justice?
Nikomaro.
Thank you. It is originally. I like the first name because my lizard brain can pronounce that better. Anyway. You could probably just look up Gardner Island on Google Earth and it'll still come up. But in April of 1940, a skull was found buried on the island. And when they were searching for Amelia and Fred, they did pass over this island because there was a shipwreck there not long before. They didn't see any sign of anyone living on it or anything. But a couple years later, they found a skull there. And they also found a shoe. And they found a bottle. And they found a sextant. And a skeleton. Basically, a whole skeleton. And at first, it was assumed that this was a skeleton of a woman just by looking at it. They did take it for testing, and they think it is likely to be that of a 5'5.5" person, maybe of European descent, but it seems like they've come to the conclusion that it was the body of a male.
How tall was Fred Noonan?
Not 5'5".
Then it's not him. Boom. That's
and she
gone.
was on her pilot's license 5'8".
Yeah, so gone. Boom.
While the islands of the Pacific are hostile environments with very limited resources, some argue that Earhart and Noonan may have been able to survive for a period of time by utilizing natural resources. But without regular access to food or water or anything really out there, you would have likely succumbed to the very harsh conditions of the South Pacific, died of starvation or exposure almost immediately. There has been not really any definitive evidence to support this theory other than the number of artifacts that people are just kind of pushing towards the idea that they could have survived, but they haven't found their plane.
Yeah, that's the number. I mean, and on top of that, think of the type of plane. I can't imagine that this plane was.
This wasn't a Boeing. Okay?
Yeah, this wasn't designed. Not even a Boeing. It wasn't designed in a way to land emergency wise. I have to imagine it was probably compared to planes today. And even planes back then that were more agile, probably not the best plane to be flying.
And I am no expert, so I could be just talking out my rear end right now. But I'm even on a perfect sea landing and where you're floating for a couple minutes.
There's only been there's been a handful of pilots in history that have been able to successfully land. Freaking what's his face? Sully. There's only a
Tom
handful.
Hanks.
Yeah, Tom Hanks. There's only a handful of pilots that have been able to do that, and it's not as easy as people think it is. I don't buy either of those theories. I think both of those theories.
Some people take the first and the second and combine them. They say they crashed in the ocean and swam to an island. Here's the thing. Like I said, if you go on Google Earth.
Yeah, but then you have to take in the intricacies and the numbers of, how likely it is you survive crashing into the ocean.
Well, here's the other thing. These are not islands like Maui and Lanai.
No.
You can't look across and see.
Also,
they're far away.
There's a current. There's a current. You have to get out of the plane as it's sinking under the water. You have to. No, that's too
A lot of people
You know what it is?
want that to be the
Freaking
truth.
Vin Diesel Fast and the Furious action movies have impacted this. Family. No.
If you jump out right when it lands,
No.
then you won't. Then you won't die.
No, it is.
I love that.
It's not. Look. I guess
meme.
my point is that it's just. I like it. I get the idea of romanticizing them living is an interesting thing, but it's dude, I hate to break it to you and everyone listening to this. In any semblance of history is interesting in the sense that in some instances, things are way more intricate and more detailed than you ever would have guessed. And then in some instances, they're incredibly boring. Occam's razor applies a lot.
It's sad. The whole thing's sad.
I think
and I
they
understand
crashed.
why people wish it. They had some life besides this scary, terrible, horrible way to die, being scared to death.
'Tis the consequence of being a pilot.
Fourth theory. This one is controversial.
Oh God.
Lesser known. But of course, as with any famous figure that goes missing, this is always a theory that they faked their own deaths and lived out the rest of their lives in secret. And this theory suggests they staged their disappearance. This is a very extreme way to stage your disappearance. I don't know why you would do this if you want to get out of the limelight, but they wanted to escape public attention, pursue other goals. I'm like, you could have just
quit,
left your car somewhere and not gone back to it. You don't drive, you don't fly over the Pacific with the whole world watching. You could have just
been like, nah, guys, no thanks.
I don't like that theory. I'm going to admit
it's a dumb theory.
I don't think it's legit. But
dumb.
A lot of people speculated that they were working as spies. U.S. government was involved somehow, or another country, and they were part of a larger covert operation. And I know there's some people who really perpetuate this theory. And listen, okay, she would be 115 years old right now if that was the case. There was actually, I know there was a woman at one point who convinced a lot of people she may be Amelia Earhart, and she was like living on the East Coast, but I'm pretty sure that was definitively proven to be bogus. But there's no conclusive evidence to support that they faked their deaths and went off to live normal lives somehow. I don't know. She's very distinctive looking, right? Like you look at Amelia Earhart and you're thinking she doesn't just look like, she doesn't have one of those faces that you feel like you would forget. You know, she just has a very distinctive look. I'm like, what?
I agree.
I think she's beautiful. I'm just saying she's just very recognizable. But it's likely, regardless of Amelia not wanting to be in public life anymore, this seems like a pretty extreme way to fake your death and not very logistic wise or logical wise.
It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Yeah, you can't be a genius and an idiot at the same time. You've got to be.
We're just going to opt for them being smarter than this theory gives them credit for, because that feels like a really.
Do you want to know my theory? Want to know my theory about this? One thing I will say is this is what I think happened. I think Amelia Earhart was a competent pilot. I think that she was good at what she did. I think that she loved what she did. I also think that she was rocketed into fame, and because of that, was not as good across the board as she needed to be in almost every circumstance. Now, granted, that applies to every pilot. You're not going to have a pilot that's going to be good at everything, which is why you need a competent team around you.
That's why you have a co-pilot.
Why you have a co-pilot. That's why you have a navigation person at this time. That's why even in the instance of pilots today, they have fallbacks and they have safety measures. What I think happened is I think the first option is likely the case. And because of that, what I think the reason they crashed into the ocean, and this is matter of fact, this has nothing at all to do with Amelia's demographic or Fred's demographic. The reason they crashed into the ocean is because they both were not as skilled as Manning was with radio. They didn't have that third piece. And they made the decision to push forward and said, "Screw it, we've done this before. It's just like everything else. We made it to the one island, Howland Island.
They never made it to Howland Island the first time. Either.
We got close enough first time, so we'll just push through." That's what I think happened, and that's unfortunate because that means that they were, in a lot of ways, ego was directing the plane as opposed to actual precise planning. That's what I think happened.
Maybe. I think it was probably that and a combination of other errors either in their control or out of their control, or just circumstances like the weather and stuff that forced them to fly lower and slower, ran out of gas. This is my theory as well, that they unfortunately crashed into the ocean.
They must have been flying for way longer, because 1,100 gallons of gas for 2,000 miles, I have to imagine, would have been at least there, if not there and a quarter or there and a half.
I think they were flying a lot lower, and that was the problem. I think they flew really low and hoping they would run right into the island and see it, and then they didn't see it, and then they were flying all over the place, and they just couldn't find it.
Which goes back to my point about navigation and radio.
Well, if alive today, like I said, she would be 115 years old, and regardless of that, she remains an icon for women empowerment in aviation, regardless of this tragic end to her career and likely life. She had some incredible achievements for her time, and she became the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean from Hawaii to California. inspired generations of women to pursue careers in male-dominated fields. I will say at least that much. And Amelia's loss was deep and great and extensive. You know, people mourned for her. And her husband, George, continued to promote her legacy. He preserved her name through, or her memory through publishing several books about her life and her career, supporting efforts to search for her, which were extremely expensive, you know, outside of the official one by the U.S. government. People are still searching to this day for her plane.
I think that if we do end up finding her, which we might, we found the the Endurance up north a few years ago.
You're thinking of...
Oh, no, I'm not thinking... No.
The Endurance was in the south, was in
Terror.
Antarctica. You're thinking of the Terror.
The Terror, we found that
up
one.
in Canada somewhere, yeah.
So, is it the Terror, or is that just the TV show?
No, the ship was called the Terror.
Yeah, so
there was another one too, but I think the Terror was the one they found.
Pretty sure.
But the Endurance was Ernest Shackleton's.
Yeah, so I mean, could we find the plane? Maybe.
I don't know. Some people are convinced that they will be able to find it.
Maybe if the plane didn't disintegrate upon impact.
Maybe it's like lost.
You missed my joke. Yeah, but the likelihood, and maybe it is like lost. The likelihood is if we do find it, where it's, I mean, the Pacific is a
big place,
deep ocean.
If you look on a globe, like just one of those old fancy physical globes, you look at it and you're like, wow. That's just one whole side. And
I have to imagine it would have traveled. It was not going to be where.
I mean, I don't. Yeah.
But who knows? Maybe LiDAR. Maybe LiDAR will help us find it.
We found the Titanic, but the Titanic was much bigger than her plane.
Titanic. I don't think they used LiDAR with that.
Well, she's celebrated in numerous books, films, other works of art. Her life achievements have been the subject of ongoing research and study. I really do like your idea of Millie Bobby Brown playing Amelia Earhart. I think that would be really, really cool, actually. But the circumstances of her disappearance are not definitively solved, and they might never be. Which is so frustrating. I hate having unsolved mysteries, but I love them at the same time.
I mean, we don't necessarily have... Here's the thing that I this is what I kind of... maybe this is callous of me. I look at scenarios like this, and I think that enough time has passed to the point where closure doesn't matter anymore. And the reason I say that...
likely long gone.
Well, yes, she is likely long gone. And the reason I say that is because we've gotten to such a point past where she would have likely died that it's like you've got multiple generations of people that exist now because of that now, or multiple decades, or I guess generations. So I guess the way I look at it is like, is it sad? Yeah, it's sad. Will we ever find the plane? Probably not. Yeah. If we do, we do, and we know.
Here's the thing that always
all the things that we have, assumed for a long time would have come to fruition. The third option, if we don't, is not who cares, but whatever the nice equal to that is.
I think at this
point... You know
what
I'm getting at? Like, it's kind of like...
No. I know. Now at the point, it's like you would solve the mystery for the sake of what? Closure for all her friends and family who are gone by now, too.
Passed away.
It's a bummer.
And here's the thing is, like, if you find that closure, then there's gonna be speculation on what caused it and why it happened. And sometimes, I mean, maybe it's just me getting old and grumpy, but sometimes I just want to be like, guys, just let it lie.
Well, we'll let it lie for now at the end of this episode. She is a symbol of courage, determination, and she continues to inspire people around the world. Please do. I know you if you're here now, you've listened to this episode, but I really encourage you to read up about Amelia Earhart. She was a very, very interesting woman. Far before her, she really led the way, I think, for a lot of women that you may think about today when you think of strong public figures. But
when I think of strong public figures, I think of Sacagawea. She's the original OG, and she was ruined by that author.
Sacagawea was amazing as well, and I highly recommend that episode. That's my favorite.
I rate all of our people.
Yes. What do you give Amelia?
Sacagawea being a 10 so far. Elizabeth Bathory being a 1. I don't know, fam. This is
not feeling Amelia.
I'm getting like a 6.
Really?
Yeah, and maybe, and you know what it is, you mid, and you know what it is because I've heard this story, and the thing that I kind of, what bothers me a lot about it, and the same thing about Sacagawea, is it like gets clouded up in this like woman empowerment thing, and I get
Sure.
and I get that, I do, but it's also tired.
Well,
Like,
I guess
it is.
on the same
It's kinda
wavelength, I talked about this with Sacagawea because I feel like on her own merit, you shouldn't have to embellish her story.
Like Amelia, never mind all this stuff about her being the first female pilot. Like, doing that as a pilot was still incredible. So this I think goes back to my story. Is my whole point is like, dude, just like, you don't have to qualify everything. Everything doesn't have to be qualified in order for you to be valuable or great. And I think of it the same way history. It's like, because he was a big, strong man. Like,
I think she recognized that because she did say when she crossed the Atlantic, she did it because someone asked her to, by the way. But she also did it and kind of said afterwards, I feel like I didn't contribute. I feel like this is not something I want. I'm sure she was proud, but like it wasn't. Well, I guess it wasn't the great feat of her life, right?
I guess my point is, it's like the great feat of her life should be who she is. Well, not these silly things that happen in the span of 20 hours.
Well, I think maybe it was more about courage than anything else for her.
Flying a plane is courage enough. Sure. You get my point? Like,
sure, yeah, but
and look, I'm not trying to discount anything. Like, I'm not trying to disqualify her accomplishments or anything. I'm just saying, like, it's like there seems to be like this thinking in society, from my perspective, when it comes to historical people, and this is part of the reason why we do this show. Is like there's this like glorifying to a point where it's like, their accomplishments were so incredible. If you had enough hours in a plane, you could probably do it too.
No, oh yeah.
So my whole,
I would hope so.
My whole thing is, it's like, if that's the case, then yes, it should be taken seriously. Yes, it should be like very impressionable, and yes, people should look to it as inspirational. But it should not just be a female icon of empowerment. What George Washington, who was a wonderful person, can't be a female icon when it comes to politics and leadership? No. We can't look to each other as leadership options. I mean, this is kind of what I'm getting at, No,
I understand. Okay, so let me rephrase. I think that she was an impressive pilot in general, just for her courageousness, not like put aside the first transatlantic flight, and then she flew it by herself, which was great. Yeah. But if you consider it from one way,
she's great generally.
Charles Lindbergh flew it first, but think about the flight from California to Hawaii. That was her doing.
But again, still, like, I guess my whole thing is like, it's still impressive.
Yeah, sure.
Like this whole I get maybe this is just me like being annoyed with the fake dichotomy of like the battle of the sexes shit. Like, maybe that's what it is, because I look at this and I'm like, she was incredible either way. Like, most people don't do that. So we can talk about how, like, yeah, she was the first person to do that, but people tend to hyper focus in, like, society tends to hyper focus in on these things. And I'm like, it's not that important. What's important is that the thing was done.
Maybe at the time, maybe not so much now.
Yeah, but
I would argue at the time, just being the 16th.
Sure. Yes. That's
person
that is
to get her pilot's license was maybe the focus when you consider.
But again, is that based on merit, or is that based on availability? You get what I'm saying? Like, if you have 100 people,
she passed her qualifications to do it.
Well, but if you have 100 people that all have the same amount of money or the same qualification, the same measures of being able to do that thing, how many of them would pass? That's what you have to think about. You have to think about the sheer numbers of it. Because I look at this scenario like, because of numbers, when I look at like occupations and careers, there are different areas where it's just lopsided. It just frankly is lopsided. You don't see a lot of male nurses. There's just not an interest there. And it doesn't mean that they can't be. It doesn't mean that you can't get involved. It just means at this point in time, there's not an interest. And that might genuinely be because of the differences between the sexes. With that being said, if you had 100 women who got the same type of training, how many of them would, succeed? I would think a lot. I would. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. I'm trying to like humanize it, because I feel like this tends to become like this. It's like with Sacagawea, like, wasn't a god, like.
Well, no. I mean, okay. The reality of the situation is Amelia Earhart was a qualified pilot who, in this situation, a number of errors could have occurred, possibly by her own hand, including the one that stopped the first attempt. So, unfortunately, she was not perfect.
But what she did was still amazing.
That we can't confirm exactly what caused the disappearance, but there is a very large possibility it could have been because of her own hand.
Maybe.
Not on purpose. I mean,
it also could have been, again, it could have been it could have happened to any pilot. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I just I'm trying to like maybe I'm not saying it well. I just think that there happens to be like this knee-jerk reaction on behalf of society, like that's why she's not going to succeed because she's a woman, or he's not patient enough because he's a guy. Like it's like
I think the world was rooting for her. I feel like when you look at it from, here's the thing, she was flying around the world and people were rooting. They didn't want her to crash.
No,
and they weren't caring about the fact necessarily that she was a woman.
I don't think most people do.
They were caring about the fact that wow, this is just an incredible feat in general. And
well, either way, I think she was incredible. I still give her like a mid out of 10 just because I've heard it before. And I think, again, it kind of goes back to that whole like that champion, like, oh, we can do it type of vibe that people are now like can't seem to figure out how to detach away from that and find new champions, which there should be. I think there should be new champions every, 10 years, in my opinion. But again, I like that's just my opinion, and I could be completely wrong. RIP. Her and Fred Noonan, sad. Manning probably had a very interesting life. I
imagine that would be a difficult thing to get over.
Yeah.
Regardless.
Well, we hope you enjoyed Amelia Earhart. She was a phenomenal individual, did some incredible things. Whether you agreed with us or not, that is totally fine.
That was a long one, guys.
It was a long
thanks
one.
for sitting through it.
Yeah, it was a long one. With that being said, hopefully you enjoyed it. And if you happen to like our content, you can find our content on Instagram at History Out of the Box. You can also find our content normally weekly on YouTube. And that's Tuesdays for the audio, Wednesdays for the video. And I didn't say this in the beginning, but if you happen to like talking about historical figures in a relatively kind of transparent light, that's kind of the purpose of our show. We want to talk about people without looking at them as if they're somehow to be lauded and incredible and not criticized. Now, granted, I know with our recent one, Mansa Musa, I was probably a little bit lightheaded, but I've said the comments that I've said in relation to world leaders before. They all like to kill people. They're all wealthy and they're all infatuated with themselves. So it's like I can't say that I can only say it so many times. But yeah, if you happen to like it, go ahead and give us a subscription. It'll be right down there. If not, no worries. Thank you again for tuning in. Thank you for your time, and we will catch you next week.
Bye.